Nick Chubb. What are you saying about Nick Chubb? What's your bold prediction?
Bold prediction, Nick Chubb finishes outside of the top 20 at RB in PPR. That's bold. He's the number 8 RB in NFC drafts right now. He's the number 11 player overall. I have him as RB 15 and more like a fringe second round pick. So I'm already lower than him than the consensus. And I do want to point out, it feels low, but I have him projected for the 3rd most rushing yards in the league and the 2nd most rushing touchdowns. And he's my RB 15.
That's because ridiculous. He's not catching anything.
How is that possible?
Because he doesn't catch passes. He has 25 catches in 19 games since Kareem Hunt joined the
Yeah, I get that, but I just feel like your projections must be way too high on too many other people because he's going to basically lead the NFL in rushing and rushing touchdowns or come top 3 in both of them. He's not going to be RB 15.
Well, no, but I'm projecting everyone to play 16 games. If he plays 16 games and has those numbers, he's going to finish higher than that. But
we have to have a 17-game jar. You have to put money in every time you say 16.
Sure, 17 games, yes. I will get used to saying 17 games in week 18 of the 2021 season.
That's when he'll remember that there's 17 games in the season.
Yeah. Because I'll be like, the season's over. Yes, I can finally relax.
We're on vacation right now. This is week 15.
So here's the thing. One, since Kareem Hunt got to Cleveland, Nick Chubb is averaging 15.6 PPR points per game. That would have been 16th in 2020 and 14th in 2019. So already he's kind of benefiting a little bit in 2019 from the fact that he played every game. 2020.
Wait, hold on. Why do I have him as he was number 9 per game last year?
No, I'm adding his 2019 games with Hunt and his 2020 games with Hunt.
So what, he wasn't that good in 2019 with Hunt?
He's averaged 15.6 per game in those 19 games they've played together. I think it's 20. Gosh, I don't know what the exact number is. I looked this up earlier.
Okay.
And so he would have been 16th in 2020 at 15.6 points per game, 14th in 2019. And that's including the fact that maybe you guys disagree, but I feel like 2020 was kind of an everything went right season for the Browns. I mean, obviously Odell Beckham got hurt, but in terms of Nick Chubb's production, you really can't ask for a better scenario than what he was facing in 2020. They really didn't have many offensive line injuries. They were able to run the ball a ton because their defense played well. They didn't have the passing game to play aggressively, and I don't think they want to. And he scored 12 touchdowns in 12 games. And he rushed for, 100 yards per game? A little bit more than that?
5.6 yards per carry, I think.
Yeah, he's capable of doing all that again, but it was out of line with his career norms. And so you have a situation where a guy's coming off his kind of what I view as a best case scenario or pretty close to it season. Usually things don't go that right for most players. You certainly can't expect things to go as right as they did for him. Sometimes lightning strikes twice, like it did for Derrick Henry in 2019 and 2020. And maybe that'll happen. And maybe Nick Chubb is so special and his situation is so good with that offensive line and that coaching staff that it just won't matter. But it's really hard to be an elite fantasy running back if you don't catch passes. You have to be so much better than pretty much everyone else when it comes to rushing the ball. If I drop him to 5th in projected rushing yards and projected touchdowns, he would drop to 20th in PPR points.
Oh, wait, but when you say elite, I have always said over and over, if you don't get to 50 catches, it's very hard to be a top 5 running back.
Mm-hmm. But he's never been a top 5 running back.
And I wouldn't draft him to be a top 5 running back. But it's not hard to be a top 10 running back. It happens all the time.
Well, no, it's hard.
No, it happens.
It does happen regularly, but there are a lot of running backs who don't catch 50 passes who don't get to the top 10. You have I think top 10 is like an 80th percentile outcome. And there is a world in which maybe Kareem Hunt takes a couple of extra touchdowns from him and he finishes with 8 instead of 10. And he misses 2 games, or he misses 1 game and leaves another one early, and all of a sudden he finishes as RB20. I'm not saying he won't be good, but for fantasy, there are running backs that I like more than Nick Chubb, mostly because of the way he's used. If that changes, if they do decide to give him even 2.5 catches per game and he gets to 40, I think he's got top 3 upside, maybe higher. But I've been given no reason to believe that that's a move that they're going to make.
Well, the first thing that stands out to me, and I knew that this was coming, was I went back and I remembered seeing Nick Chubb get involved in the passing game a little bit more toward the end of last season. It was in the playoffs as well. Last 4 games, 15 targets, 11 catches, 111 yards, and a touchdown. Is that a byproduct of them just trying to throw a new wrinkle in at the end of the year for defenses to prepare for? Could it be something that they try and build off of? I'm not saying that he's going to get, 3 catches per game, which is basically what he was averaging here. But I think Nick Chubb could catch the football if they wanted to get involved in that way. They had already been giving him 15.8 carries per game in the regular season. That includes the game he left early against Dallas. Throw that game out, and it's looking more like 16 or 17 carries per game. You always want a running back that's going to get that type of work, PPR, non-PPR. There are only 5 running backs, 5, that last year finished in the top 10 in Pro Football Focus's elusive metric and yards after contact per attempt. Chubb was the only one to finish in the top 2 in both categories. So he gets you numbers after contact. He's elusive as heck. We all know this. He gets goal line opportunities. That offensive line, you brought it up, Chris. It was the top-ranked run-blocking offensive line in Pro Football Focus. The schedule isn't that bad. I don't see a way for me getting away. I don't see a way for me to get away from Nick Chubb as a pretty much a top 10 running back in fantasy, regardless of format. Yeah, and Derrick Henry's proven it over the past couple of years. Not that Nick Chubb is exactly what Derrick Henry is, but you can put up huge numbers on the ground and not a lot catching the football and still be very good in PPR formats. It is very bold to say that he won't finish as a top 20 running back. The only way that I see that happening is if you are predicting a Nick Chubb injury or that Kareem Hunt runs like God and that forces Nick Chubb to the bench and Kareem Hunt ends up playing just like at an MVP type level.
I would say he's a running back. So if you did want to project an injury or predict an injury for him, probably not a bad
sure.
Bad
I mean, but
it'll probably happen.
we can do that, and it has happened to Chubb. But we're
not part of the discussion here. You're
right.
That's of course not.
Seasons.
But I'll tell you what, like when Chris said that he was projecting everybody for 16 games, I thought that's actually ingenious because it's going to be rare for anybody to play 17 games this year. That's what
I do have everyone projected for 17, but yes. One, I do think there will be more running back injuries than normal, even on a per game basis, just because we're going to be looking at teams playing 13 weeks in a row to start the season. I think are there 4 teams who have a bye in week 14?
I believe so.
Yeah, and then there's a couple of teams that have 14 in a row to end the season. So let's just get a 19 week season and get 2 buys. This is ridiculous.
Yeah, that'll happen. Look, I understand what you're saying. The catches are going to be really low in all likelihood. One thing I do want to point out though is that the first 3 games of the season, Nick Chubb, before he got injured in week 4. Nick Chubb had 51 carries and Kareem Hunt had 39. That's a really, really bad split. But in the last 6 games, Chubb had 88 carries and Hunt had 41. Kareem Hunt is a good player, and I think Nick Chubb is so clearly better. I mean, he is arguably the best running back in football.
I agree with all that.
So I think that there's this opportunity for him to actually really leave Kareem Hunt in the dust a little bit. People might not be aware of how tilted it was toward the end of the season after he came back from the injury, but he was just so much better and got so much more work than Kareem Hunt did. And the defense, you mentioned the defense, it's going to be, I can't see how it's worse this year. It should be so much better this year. They have the opportunity to have the best defense in football. A lot of people are very high on their defense. They had a great offseason. They get some secondary members who were hurt all of last year back, Jadeveon Clowney, all that stuff. So that should factor in well for him as well. I get what you're saying. Yeah, so I think DeAndre Swift versus Nick Chubb is
I have Chubb 1 spot higher.
Oh, you do?
Yeah.
Okay.
But and that's before, actually 2 spots higher. I have Chris Carson between them, and that's before I didn't really change anything with Swift yet. With
Carson over Swift or Chubb?
Carson over Swift. Yeah.
So Chubb, Carson, Swift.
Yep.
Interesting.
Can you name a couple other running backs that you have ranked just ahead of Chubb in PPR?
Yeah, and just to be clear, the gaps between these players, I mean, Swift is at 250 projected points, and Clyde Edwards-Helaire is at 268 at 11. Okay. So that's a point per game difference between number 11 and number 16 or 17. I have Antonio Gibson, Cam Akers, Jonathan Taylor, Clyde Edwards-Helaire just ahead of Nick Chubb. And it basically just comes down to those guys are all projected for at least 20 more receptions, except for Taylor, who I think is maybe not quite as good as Nick Chubb as a running back, but he might be. And the situation might be just as good, if not better. So
yeah, I think we'd all take Taylor over Chubb, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But for me, it's really hard to get around the fact that I have Chubb projected for 26 receptions, which would be 9 more than he had last year.
Yeah, he missed a bunch of games.
He missed 4 games, but that's 17 games versus 12. So that's around the same pace, maybe a little higher. I have him for 1,440 yards, 11 touchdowns, and a receiving touchdown. I have him for 1,440 yards, over 1,600 yards total offense.
Oh, total. Yeah, so Nick Chubb has averaged more than 100 total yards per game, I believe 2 straight seasons. 111 in 2019, 107 in 2020.
Yeah, that's incredible.
But there was
Alvin Kamara averages.
But there was a difference between what Chubb did in the first 9 games of 2019 and what he did after that.
Yeah, but then what about 2020? I mean, 107 total yards.
Right. I think he's really good. He was at 98 yards per game after Kareem Hunt was added. Like I said, if you add Kareem Hunt, the time he spent with Kareem Hunt, it's 15.6 fantasy points per game, which is really good. But it's closer to around the high to mid-range number 2 range for running backs in a given season.